I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. It's our own David Alexander. I say our own because David's been a member of the Ethical Culture Society for years, and he's really part of our community. David is a psychotherapist, a practitioner of nonviolent communication, a Tai Chi instructor, and that has encouraged him to speak to us on the topic of solving roots of conflict, a nonviolent approach. So if Joan can let go of David for a minute. You're on, David.
I was looking at that poem. Actually, I like the humor because it also has an edge to it, like mothers being a little off color and surprising. You know, it questions the taboo about mother love and being perfect or not. So humor that gets rid of taboos helps us feel free, right? We all know that there's some political division in the country. I'm not going to focus too much on politics, but I started looking into nonviolent communication like 6 years ago, and it kind of answers, along with some other sources, why we have this inability to communicate. And I work with couples and individuals as a therapist. I'm not an international negotiator. Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Nonviolent Communication, did a lot of that. He worked in the Middle East, Rwanda, and several other major war zones. And he did negotiate, and he wrote about it quite a lot. But people are still people, whether it's a large group of people or a couple or one person, the same principles of human nature apply. So I will be bringing in understanding of people, not so much the methodology of negotiating on an international scale. So nonviolent communication is based on empathy. Before any kind of technique works, we need to understand people and appreciate everyone around us if possible, no matter how difficult their behaviors are to accept, or no matter how harmful their behaviors are. How can we avoid condemning them? And there are many different kinds of condemnation: stupid, evil, out of touch, liberal, conservative, smart, stupid. So all those things are labels, and when you see another human being, we shouldn't be ignoring their human nature. And also, everything we do is based on fulfilling a need. No matter how misguided it is, everything a person does is based on fulfilling a need. So think about that. Think about the worst things you see, either in your own life or in the international world. Everyone is trying to make life better. No matter how crazy it seems with what they're doing, it's all to make life better. And people have very harmful ideas about how to do that. But the fundamental goal that people feel is, how do I make life better? And we can't ignore that part of their behaviors. Otherwise, we go into enemy camps. And whether it's a divorce or World War III or anything in between, or even being annoyed with somebody, ideally we can live life and make life better for everyone. I love the, deed before creed is important, but also it's right here in the program. I'll read it. How can I bring out the best in others and thereby bring out the best in myself? It doesn't say the best in some others. It says others. That includes everyone. So, all right. Nonviolent communication is a framework or an approach which analyzes very carefully, based on empathy and human nature, how do we connect to people in all different kinds of circumstances. I'm going to give you some examples now. NVC, nonviolent communication, doesn't use this 3 colors, red, yellow, and green. Red is the worst. You're lazy. Now, actually, we might have said it to ourselves. I'm lazy. I'm always late. It's still violent communication to oneself. You're lazy, or you say, I'm lazy. Those are harsh words. That's red. That's quite violent. Violence, we're accustomed to it meaning, fighting in a war or assaulting someone. But actually, words can do violence as well, and they certainly do, on a more subtle level. So instead of saying you're lazy, what if you said, you don't do these projects when you're expected to do them? You don't do what you're supposed to do. Or this project wasn't turned in when it was due. That's neutral. I would call that yellow. You're not attacking the person directly. But if you could say something like, I'm worried you might lose that job because the projects are getting turned in late at work, and I want us to be financially secure so we can enjoy life together. I'm worried about it. Now you're talking person to person about what motivates you, what you're feeling, and indirectly making a request. Can you see the difference between those 3 things? Going from one extreme to the other. So it's finding ways to connect by being authentic. Vulnerable is another word for it. So NVC, nonviolent communication, applies to individuals, couples, groups, nations. In the East, they talk about skillful and non-skillful means of doing everything, actions or words. So instead of good and bad, I know mostly about Zen and Buddhism. Instead of good and bad, there's skillful actions and unskillful actions. Unskillful actions cause pain and suffering. Skillful actions help relieve pain and suffering. So again, we avoid the label, that is good, that is bad, or you're good or you're bad. Rather, we're saying, can we talk about what just happened? I want to understand why you did that, and let's see what's going on. So those things lead to more connection. I am going to have a little quiz soon, so you have to keep listening. So it's not graded, though, so don't worry. So I am going to make one reference to a little history. When our president said, in the middle of a war, bring it on. Do you remember that? That was George Bush and the Iraq War. Bring it on. Who would say that's nonviolent communication? No. Okay, this audience, I don't think we would. But what could he have said differently if he wanted to communicate determination? See, let's get into it a little. Anyone want to come up with a phrase to communicate? I think he wanted to communicate, what he wanted to do was to communicate determination, right? We're strong, we're going to stand up. What's a better way to say it? Instead of bring it on.
We'll do our best.
We'll do our best and we're not going to back down. Right. We don't want this war. If you change this, we can avoid it, but if you don't allow, if you keep protecting Al-Qaeda or whatever it was in that case, we're going to have to take action. And I think, some of that was done, but the bring it on comment, somebody gave him that script, and it didn't go over well. So another idea is that we should be listening to understand, not to prepare a response like a debate. Understand what a person's experience is. Sometimes it's on trivial matters like daily activities, and yet you can see the person looks sad or angry or very happy, and you might want to connect to that. You look like you're in a good mood today or a bad mood. You want to talk about it? So we want to listen to the whole person and not judge. All right. I'll give an example. Have you seen on television when they interview Trump supporters? I'm gonna come at liberals too, all right? So don't worry, I'm unbiased. But you know, I've noticed, and I was surprised, that when they do these satirical interviews, actual interviews at Trump gatherings, and someone from one of the TV stations asks them questions to show how they're kind of ignorant, maybe. But you know, the answers the people give are very friendly. Like, these supporters are pretty, you've noticed that, right? They're not angry, hostile people. You know, maybe some of them, of course some of them are, but the ones that get interviewed, they're honestly answering, and they care about it, they believe in something. And it struck me that even if we saw more of that, it might help get rid of some of these divisions where we imagine these are all totally irrational, evil people, or totally hostile. So on the other hand, when liberals say they're all stupid, they're stupid people, they're uninformed, ignorant, it's not helping either, is it? No. So there's different ways of being violent. One thing is, if you practice nonviolence, no one else around you has to practice it. We have total control over our own behavior. So that's something to remember. And second corollary to that is, you won't always get the response you want right away, but you can plant seeds or create some connection and thought, and you don't know when later on that will lead to something good. So it's important how we use words or silence, action, inaction. Marshall Rosenberg has a statement that's pretty fairly famous, and I think it's great. Every criticism, judgment, diagnosis, and expression of anger is the tragic expression of an unmet need. Every criticism, judgment, diagnosis, and expression of anger, including violence, is the tragic expression of an unmet need. You know why it's tragic? It's tragic because it won't get what you want. So, you know, starting wars, who wins? And if you superficially get what you want for a short period, eventually you're going to have to pay a price for it. So violence is a tragic expression of unmet needs. The needs for freedom, the needs for self-determination, the needs for safety. Those are all valid, right? But we can think of various groups who feel threatened. In fact, if you look at the Middle East, both sides feel threatened. And if they could connect at the basis of needs for safety, self-determination, respect, other basic things, food, water, things that people need, they could work something out. So, I want to mention something called enemy images. I came up with another expression. In nonviolent communication, they talk about enemy images, but I'm going to modify that a little bit. I'll call it a distancing image, because if you say to somebody, you're very smart, or you're brilliant, depending on the circumstances, that could be a distancing statement. Now you put that person on a pedestal. You might even resent them being very smart. There's in psychotherapy, we learn there's an equal and opposite side to things. If you're a worshiper of someone, you resent them at the same time. So if you say you're very smart, or you're the opposite of that, those are distancing statements. Instead of saying you're very smart, I know this is a little tough. Does anyone have an idea? Suppose you somebody gave a good talk. What could you say to explain how you appreciate them after they, I'm not talking about here, by the way. This actually comes from one of the books, so it looks like I planned it, but I didn't. But yeah, sure. I'm going to repeat it back. Yeah.
I admire the way the person was able to break down the complicated set of concepts.
And why is all that good?
Well, because it is more identifying the specific skill that person had and how he
Yes.
mentioned or
All right, let me say it back to the others. First, be specific about what it is you appreciated, like, that they broke something down very effectively or explained something very well. I agree with that. And there's one more piece to, instead of saying you're very smart or you're a wonderful speaker, you explain what you appreciated and what else might. Did you study this before? No, very good. I think I think you have a hidden crib sheet there, no? No, okay. The other part of it is like how it made your life better, how it helped you, how you felt more clarity and peace, or you know how to talk to your child who's been difficult or you've had a hard time with them. Something that how it affected you, like you're making me feel much better, I can go home and have this conversation because you explained it so well. So that's how, in a nonviolent way, you share yourself rather than simply saying, you're so smart, which in a way creates a distance. I would call it a yellow statement. It's obviously not really bad either, but it misses an opportunity to connect. And what we really want to do is use these opportunities we have in life to make things even better. If they're good, make them better. If they're not good, make them good. So that's part of nonviolent communication. So enemy images would be one, society thinking another society is evil. They're all thieves. They're all violent. They're all, you name it, selfish. Now, in the Middle East, we probably have heard there's a lot of people who don't think that way. In other words, they're trying to bring people together, and that's terrific. But I think it's important not to take sides, and judging either side as right is going to cause more conflict. It's important to get people to listen to each other and start to understand each other. Marsha Rosenberg, in the books, I'll provide some information maybe to go in the newsletter later, the next newsletter, about good reading for this. But one of the things he brings up is very violent groups where people had been killing each other, literally like gangs. He got them together, and after hours of going back and forth, they were able to really appreciate each other and how they were all feeling the pain of that warfare, of gang warfare, and several situations like that. So it is possible to reach everyone. In some cases, it takes a lot longer. But when we're nonviolent, it's good for us. Whether or not we get a specific response from the other person, we want to make a world that's more nonviolent. So I've done some reading this week, trying to expand some of my knowledge. It was interesting. I looked at South Africa and their Truth and Reconciliation Commission and how they did that. I was curious, again, like when you had really a lot of suffering, how do you handle it? And they put a religious figure, Desmond Tutu, in charge of that. And that worked because it wasn't a religious conflict. In Ireland, they put a judicial figure in charge, not a spiritual or religious figure, because that was partially religious conflict. But in these Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, there have been many, 30, 40, 50 around the world. I had only heard about the one in South Africa, but this has gone on all over the world. And it's related to nonviolent communication because you're there to learn the truth and let everyone speak and be respected. And then in some cases, there are reparations to help restore. It's called restorative justice, to bring people wholeness and help people live in harmony. So this is more of the international stage, but it has big impact when you can do that. Does anyone here do negotiation on conflicting groups like that? Or locally negotiating? Not really, right? One other thing I wanted to bring up is generational trauma and individual trauma. Sometimes when you talk to a person, if they've been lied to many times, they may be suspicious of why you're doing it, and they'll interpret your attempt to ask a question, let's say, as, are you trying to trap me? Or if you ask your son or daughter to take out the garbage, you know, why, I'm not good enough, and they'll resist because they don't understand you're trying to work together. So sometimes you have to go out of your way and repeat something several times and explain and come back to it a few days later and not lose your cool. So people who've been hurt are suspicious and self-protective. So there's a patience aspect to this communication. Okay, I said there would be a little audience interaction, and we have 5 minutes or so. Yes?
Do you want to do it as a Q&A or just keep it?
No, the only problem we have is the microphone, so you
Oh.
have to repeat what people said.
Oh, I did repeat the one, yes.
When someone attacks you
What?
verbally,
Mhm.
how do you respond in a nonviolent way?
Okay, the question is, when someone attacks you verbally, how do you respond in a nonviolent way? First of all, it depends somewhat on the specific situation, right? Do you know the person? Is it a total stranger? There's many variations, right? If you don't know the person, I mean, if a person is very aggressive and violent, you might just say, I'm sorry you feel that way, for example. You may not, you never want to challenge someone who's angry, because that can make them more angry. If you know the person, you might do more. You might say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Can you tell me what is making you say that? I want to understand better because I value our relationship. You don't always have to say all these words, right? But I want to understand better. Can you tell me what's going on? Right? Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
So you try to diffuse it.
Yeah, if you're not taking it personally, you know, a lot of this is based on not taking anything personally, you know, the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally is one of them. Another saying is, if someone yells at you, it's saying more about them than about you, although there's room to reflect, did I do something wrong? But if they're abusive, let's say in language, they're upset, something's going on. You know, can you tell me what's going on? Show interest. They probably need some interest. Is that the timer?
Well, again,
No,
I
no, no.
said,
No.
David, this was an atrocious lecture. I don't know what you were thinking. How would you respond back to me?
David, this is an atrocious lecture. What were you thinking? I'd say, oh, I'm very surprised. Tell me more. You know, we had a meeting here that actually sort of happened about 15 years ago, and there was some conflict in the society, and we had a big meeting here, and I was leading the meeting, and tempers were very high, but fortunately I kept my cool and you know, listened to everyone. We did our own Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so everyone got to speak, and after that things calmed down. You know, after some months of back and forth, it started to calm down after we had that open discussion. So the important thing is not to react with an inflammatory kind of or protective response, or how dare you say that, or forget all that. Okay, yeah.
So it sounds like I statements are part of this whole process, and they're extremely important, right?
I statements are important, yes. One I like to use is on a very simple topic. If 2 people are in a room and one says, it's cold here, The other one could say, no, it's not. That's happened to you, right? Okay. I bet it's happened to everyone in some form. If you just say, I'm cold, I feel cold, no one can argue with you, right? So that's an I statement. Little things like that make a difference. I feel cold. Oh, can I get your coat for you or whatever? Versus, no, it's not cold here, and you might even have a discussion about that. So I statements are very good as long as it's not, I feel you're stupid. So that we have to use, just saying I is not enough by itself, perhaps, right? All right, so I'll just ask one question and then we'll stop, like a little practice thing. Okay, if someone says you're always late, let's say you're a significant other or family member, you're always late, or how would you respond to that? And how would you, if it was you, how would you say it differently than that? Any thoughts? You're always late.
I would say, you're right, I am always late, if you are always late.
Yeah, so, okay, first strategy, admit it. Yes, I am always late, you're right. Okay, that's not bad. They might say, so why are you always late? Now what happens? Do you have a?
Yeah, I have a son who's old. He and his wife, they're always late. I'm used to it. I still love it.
Strategy number 2 is getting used to it and not making a big deal about it.
They have 3 children.
Okay, 2 of them are on time, 1 is late. Okay, you're ahead of the game. Okay, Judy.
I have friends who are always late, and I finally asked her, what is it she does before she comes over to my house for dinner? Because, you know, she knows she was late, and she had to look into what she does. And she says things to herself like, wait, I could do this last thing, I could do this last thing, I could do this last thing. So I understood what was going on before that, and as a result, she's not always so late all the time, because I think she became more aware of what she was doing.
Okay, yes, so Judy said that this friend who was mostly very late, she asked this friend, what is it you're doing before you're coming over to visit, right before you leave? And the friend looked closely and said, oh, I talked myself into doing a lot of things thinking I have time. And the result of having that conversation, the friend is less often late. And obviously, you asked it in a way like you were trying to understand what was going on, not attacking her, right? So, yeah. All right, I think we have to stop. So thank you, everybody. Let's all communicate and bring out the best in each other.
Thank you, David. That was really instructive. You're so smart. Yeah. So how did that make you feel? I don't know. Huh.